Hi there, girls. Just going to go through one or two things that we didn't get the chance to go over in our last online class. So we had gone through most of the stuff within that statistics chapter, but we had missed out on population and sampling. So what exactly do we mean when we say a population? Well, that's really just whatever group we're studying. So imagine I was studying all Leaving Cert students and I wanted to know data about Leaving Cert students. Well, then my population would be all the Leaving Cert students in the country. What if I wanted to know about Irish accountants? Well, then it would be all the accountants in the country. What if I wanted to know some data and kind of predict stuff about I don't know Call of Duty gamers? Well, then I would have my population be Call of Duty gamers, and so on. A sample is the group of people. So a group of people to represent the population. So needless to say, I'm not going to ask every single Leaving Cert student in the country about, the current situation. Instead, I'm going to take a random kind of sample. I'm going to get a representative sample of these Leaving Cert students and ask them. And if my sample is what we refer to as representative, my sample is what we call representative. That means that the sample accurately kind of has the same distribution of people, same distribution of ethnicities across the sample as you would see in, let's say, Leaving Cert students. And it's good at just kind of being kind of a scaled down version of the population that we're studying. So imagine I was taking Irish accountants. If I just went and asked only Dublin based accountants, I wouldn't really get a perfectly representative sample. And that kind of brings us to what we call bias when sampling. So a sample is biased if we end up favoring one particular group. So imagine if I went and I asked all the people in Dublin for how they were going to vote in the next election. Well, Dublin 4, a bit of an affluent area, a bit of a wealthy area, so you would expect that that population would vote more in line with their interests. Where if I went to a very disadvantaged area, you'd probably get very different beliefs and different politics from from two different samples. So when we try to sample a population, we really try as much as we possibly can to make that sample representative of the population. So another example I might pick is imagine I stood outside a gym and I asked every person coming out of the gym how they were going to vote. Sorry, I asked everyone coming out of a gym, how regularly they exercised. Well, the person who goes more frequently to the gym is going to be taken up way more, is going to be way more likely to be asked coming out of a gym. And so you would expect the people coming out of a gym to exercise more than your average population. So that's what we mean by bias when we're sampling. So I know we've hit upon bias in a number of different ways. Really, it's any way in which you skew your data through kind of uh, pre-existing understandings. Finally, we've got simple random sample. So the idea there is if you have a list of the population, so if I have a list of all the names of Leaving Cert students, for example, or actually no, if I've got a list of all the accountants, because they have to register in order to be accountants, then I could just randomly select people from that from that list. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so you just randomly pick people. You need to have your random sample be what we refer to as truly random. So I would say, if you roll the dice, you might start getting a more random sample. If you took numbers from what we call random number tables, which are literally just books of random numbers, you would start to see a more accurate representation, because we expect that if we just keep sampling randomly, the sample you will get will be roughly representative of the population. So that's a theory. Let's look at one or two questions, and then I'll set you guys some homework. So Melanie wants to find out how often people go to the cinema. She gives a questionnaire to all the women leaving a cinema. Her sample is biased. Give 2 possible reasons why. Now, I can actually technically see 3. And what I'd say is, okay, the first reason why this is biased is that she is giving questionnaires to people leaving a cinema. So those people already have gone to the cinema at least once in the last day or two. If you ask the question, how many times a week do you go to the cinema? And you stood outside a cinema and asked people, I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who goes, I never go to the cinema, because they're not going to be leaving a cinema then. Second possible reason is that she's only sampling women, and there may be some gender difference in terms of how frequently people go to the cinema. I don't know if there is, but you don't know until you actually do studies on that. So I would say that is another possible source of bias. And then finally, she's giving the questionnaire to people leaving one particular cinema. So if that cinema, has a very small catchment area, if it's the local cinema in a small town, it's likely that that's kind of capturing all the people who regularly go to the cinema. But if it kind of has, if it's a cinema that isn't that popular, or if it's a cinema that's very popular, or if it's a cinema that's very popular with people who regularly go to the cinema. So, for example, if you have one of those like year-long subscriptions to be able to go to whatever movie you want, those type of people are more likely to go to that particular cinema that they have the subscription for. So 3 possible reasons. Another one here, comment on any possible bias in the following situations. 6-year students only are interviewed about changes to school uniform. Well, firstly, 6-year students, they won't have to worry about changes to the school uniform after that year. And generally, school uniform changes happen between years. So that's a possible source of bias. Similarly, 6th years, students who really hate school and really hate school uniforms, well, they might not stay in school until 6th year. So that, again, a possible source of bias. Motorists stopped in peak hour traffic are interviewed about traffic problems. Well, if a motorist is stopped in peak hour traffic, they are already quite upset about traffic problems because they're dealing with one in that very moment. It's like asking someone how they feel about the police after they're arrested. It's going to skew data. Real estate agents are interviewed about the prices of houses. Well, a real estate agent is going to get more money the higher the price of houses are. So they're going to be biased in favor of raising prices. And who will you vote for survey at an expensive city restaurant? Well, again, this brings me back to that D4 example I gave. If you go to a very expensive restaurant, who's going to be at the very expensive restaurant? Well, the wealthy, and the wealthy typically vote more in favor of conservative economic policies or right-wing economic policies than left-wing economic policies. So there's your examples of bias. So girls, just as homework, can we do pages 115 through 116, questions 1 through 8. Okay? Thank you very much, girls. Have a lovely, lovely day. Bye-bye.